Hello and welcome to Something Rotten, Season 4, Episode 4, We've Beat the Darkness 2. My name is Jacob Geller. I am here as always with Blake Hester, and we have a very special guest from Into the Spine, the host of the Breakdown podcast, freelancer everywhere, Diego. Hello.
Hi, hello. Happy to be here. I'm Diego Arguello. I'm that writer from Argentina that people talk about sometimes. Saying positive things sometimes on Twitter.com, thankfully. Happy to be here. Talking about one of the best games ever. I'm just gonna introduce myself with that, yeah.
If I can give a peek behind the curtain, Diego and I talk perhaps more than I talk to anyone else on the planet. And since I've known Diego, he has messaged me every single day and been like, hey, The Darkness 2. And I'm like, Diego, I've never played The Darkness 2. And finally, now that I have, I understand why part of your personality is The Darkness 2, because I have now adopted this as a big cornerstone of my life.
So before we jump into it, question one, do you have a relationship with The Darkness 1, Diego?
No, actually. I mean, I started with the sequel years ago, I think around launch. And I was like, what is this game? Like, why is this shooter have tentacles at the same time as you're shooting, and there's all of these things happening? And I played it and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to get a PS3. And even more so, a physical copy for The Darkness 1. And when I did, I was so excited to play it. And it's rough to play nowadays. It's tough.
Yeah.
Especially going backwards. Blake and I both had the incredible experience of starting with the rough one and then going into The Darkness 2. But starting with The Darkness 2 and then going backward as a rocky transition for sure.
Yeah. As much as I heard a lot of great things about the story, and I want to sit down and play it eventually. I played a couple of hours and I got the feeling of the game. But yeah, that needs a remaster of sorts, immediately.
It's like such a good story and such a good world, and the second you start moving in the game, it's like, nope, don't want to do this at all. Darkness 2 on the other hand.
Darkness 2 on the other hand. So, last episode, Blake and I talked about the first half of The Darkness. This time, we've played all of it. We're going to talk about the whole story. We're going to get into everything else. In general, Diego, is the appeal of The Darkness 2 purely mechanical for you, or do you are you attached to the story as well?
I think both. I love that back and forth with Shenny all the time. That was something I was very fond of, because I was not used to seeing that on first person shooters. Again, this was years and years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When I first played it. But that's something that stuck with me, the scene at the diner and all that the stuff, or in the first game, being in the couch. And I like that sense of the story and that parallel between this is a different reality sometimes, you don't know what's real and what not. I thought that was interesting from a story standpoint. But yeah, I mean, you get one set piece and then you're just seeing people flying around or thrown against a wall, and you're back again at it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an interesting rhythm, I think.
Yeah, okay. So, when we last left off, Jackie's mansion had been attacked, or his penthouse apartment. Aunt Sarah had been killed, and we were thrown back into this asylum that he keeps returning to. Feelings about this? How in the second half, what'd you think about the asylum?
It never got interesting for me. It's just cool. Here's a little loading screen. They're getting the rest of the game. That's not how that works, obviously. But I don't know. It didn't do much for me. It felt like they thought it was more clever than it was. I thought it was kind of cool seeing some of the characters. I finally saw the janitor that you mentioned to me last week. On that, narratively, I thought it was far more interesting just in the real world, or when you actually go beyond the asylum to hell. I thought there was better stuff going on there. I don't know.
I like the idea of escaping from it, and I like that you and Johnny, the kind of, crazy guy in the story, and then Nobby, the janitor / Darkling, are helping you escape. But I also feel like if they did this once, it would have been this like really cool set piece that we talked about, and instead you go back like 5 times, and by the time you eventually do choose to jump off the roof, the novelty of it has just kind of worn away.
I couldn't get off that damn roof quick enough, man. I was trying to get out of there. Hey, Jacob, have you been listening to the Nebula feed of our podcast?
Yeah, duh. I'm impatient. I want to hear what happens on the show next week, and Nebula gets all the episodes a week early.
Sure, and they get bonus episodes too. But, we still do have to record next week's episode first.
Oh, I keep forgetting we don't live in the future.
This shit was annoying me. Though, after this, you go back to the house, and I took the time to explore your, like, ransacked house, and even went to the places they'll like, try to stop Jackie from going to a few places, like the room where you and Aunt Sarah are killed, and you can go up there and explore, and they put so much work into the aftermath of this place, which was truly wild.
Oh, did they really? The only thing... I wrote down that if you walk into the bathroom, Butcher is there trying to stuff body parts down the toilet. And I was like...
Oh, I missed him.
I was like, isn't your job, like, getting rid of bodies? This seems like a terrible way of getting rid of bodies.
I missed him. Yeah, so I decided to look around, and when I went to walk upstairs, Jimmy the Grape or whoever was like, Jackie, don't go up there. You don't want to see it. And I was like, come on, bro. It's a video game. That's not real. So I walked up there, and sure enough, there was the room where Sarah died, and it was, horrific. But you can also go in Jackie's room, and, like, the kind of weird shrine to Ginny is destroyed, and, like, there's, like, her shattered picture on the floor. Like, it's really cool. Just kind of, like, taking a moment to, like, look around and be like, damn, they kind of remade this house. And then later, when the house is sort of put back together, you can find plastered bullet holes.
Yes.
In the wall.
I thought that was really cool. It really, that mansion area is so kind of lovingly made, and then feels like they ran out of budget a little bit. That it's like, there's like one mini game where you can shoot pigeons on the roof with a shotgun. Did you do that?
I didn't see that.
I think it might only happen before the house is ransacked, but there's like Dolfo, and he's like, hey boss, let's show these flying rats what's what, and then you can like shoot the pigeons. But that is the only like thing that you can do at the mansion, and it just seems like such a big and detailed area for nothing to have happened.
You know what I think is? I think it's loosely based on Donald Trump's New York City apartment in Trump Tower. Like, it has the same feeling as that. Like, even with, like, I think he also has, like, a shit painted on his ceiling. I know there's a better word for that. That's just not coming to me.
I mean, I feel like that's just, like, it's just the rich fucker aesthetic.
No, I don't know. I think it's like specifically a Donald Trump New York aesthetic.
That's very funny.
Like, I think that's where they're pulling from. And I only know what Donald Trump's apartment looks like as a close personal friend of mine.
So then after that, you go to Aunt Sarah's funeral. That's the next big level in the game. Diego, funeral, thumbs up, thumbs down. How do you feel about it?
I mean, is it that much of a funeral? It only lasts like... It's funny because, like, in the presentation, like, as you're walking in, it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have like a big celebration, something like that. Like, yeah, Catholics like to talk. And I think it lasts for like less than a minute before like shit goes down, basically.
Well, I think technically it's her wake, right? The funeral was elsewhere. We're just going to bury her here.
Okay. Oh, I guess. Yeah.
As a non-Catholic who went to Catholic school, though, I did enjoy that line because I had to go to mass a lot as a child, and I was like, that's a funny line. They do like to talk.
I like the aesthetic of like the kind of having the umbrellas, having it be a rainy day. It's a very classic kind of mafia movie type setting, or Max Payne, other Something Rotten connections. But I do think it does it well. But then, they immediately blow up the wedding by having a dude shoot a rocket at you, and Aunt Sarah literally like falls out of her coffin, and then you start blasting. But it's like, it is just so kind of over the top, like, Jackie, no one's ever gonna respect him again. Even at his funeral, they're blowing his aunt out of her coffin. It's a lot.
A horrible thing to do to a corpse. I'll tell you that much. Like, my God.
The Something Rotten stance, generally don't do that. But
don't desecrate corpses.
This level, like every other level in the game, is really fun.
I really like it. I think the boss fight at the end is a little frustrating. We had this issue yesterday playing the co-op, but it also started really rearing its head for me in this level, and then the next level, which is where the honeymoon period sort of ended for me with this game. Where the lights, you shoot them out, that's great, love it. But they just occasionally make them too bright to the point you can't actually see the light, and some of them are small. And the boss fight is kind of brought down by a van that drives up and blinds you, and I could not find the actual light source. I would just shoot at it constantly. So it's like, I like the aesthetics of the level, but there was right about this point, the game started introducing these little annoyances that started digging under my skin, and like I felt like I had to repeat this just one too many times.
Yeah, I totally agree. It has these kind of like either they're blinding you and so the actual sources are small but you can't see it, or they're like attached to a generator elsewhere or whatever, where it just feels like you can't avoid the light. But what I do like about this level is previously the levels have kind of been in like construction, like zones and warehouses and places where there's a lot of like industrial stuff to throw around, and now it is replaced by stuff in a graveyard to throw around, and so you're like picking up concrete pots of flowers and hurling them at people, or taking these like plaques off the side of what are the little houses? Mausoleums. Not a thing that Jews do. You're taking the plaques off the sides of mausoleums and using them as a shield before like slicing dudes in half, and it is just that kind of like the way that the game can constantly give you just objects from the environment to throw around never stops being entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. You kill the man who killed Aunt Sarah in this, and it's one of the most brutal things I've ever seen in my life. Here's the thing: you quad wield this man. Mm-hmm. You take one tentacle to the right side of his chest, one to the left. You tear him open. I guess would that be like? Kind of like a vivisection where you pull back the flesh and leave the organs intact. And then Jackie takes his little human hands, his little phalanges, reaches in there for reasons a little out of character for him, and just rips the man's heart out with his hand. It looks at his beating heart for a bit. It's truly gross. It is a gross moment.
It's very Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, just like, and I guess it serves to show, he really had a personal vendetta against this guy. But it does represent a big change from the Darkness 1, where, as we talked about, even the biggest bosses just kind of died like men. They would just, you just kind of shoot them and they'd fall over. And in this, it's like, no, they're getting like super villain deaths.
It's also like a bit of a narrative climax for the game halfway through, because even the final boss, Jackie, is not going that hard over.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Like, I mean, like, definitely Jackie has more story he needs to do for the rest of the game, but I think he actually kind of gets the revenge he truly wants at, like, the halfway point, which is a little narratively messy.
Yes. Diego, I guess I want to get your perspective on... So this podcast in general is Blake and I talking about these games that are generally kind of wriggling around in gore and viscera and violence, like they are often over the top and indulgent in these ways. And I guess, like, do you also find that interesting in games? Do you seek it out? Do you avoid it? What is your relationship with things like Jackie ripping a guy's chest open?
Oh, I thought it was. I mean, again, it was like years ago. I thought it was like incredible at the time. And I was like, I think that was like the moment that clicked for me of being like, I mean, I have been using like the Anaconda thing with the Darklings like 1,000 times already by that point. But seeing that cutscene was like, wow, I never expected to like see something like this like in a game before. And now seeing like, I think it's time to play it again. But I was watching a long play on YouTube. And seeing the scene again, which I didn't remember like exactly how it went down. I was like, this is still cool. Like, I mean, it's awful and it's disgusting. But I don't remember like any other game doing like something like this. And it's like you can see that they went in on the details for the inside of his chest. Perhaps to like unnecessarily like levels of detail. But I play Manhunt as well. Like I remember like specifically looking for like the uncensored version back when like for PC. And yeah, I don't know, like I'm drawn out. Like I found them interesting, even if they're like sometimes a bit, I don't know, silly things. But I don't know, I'm often charmed by that spectacle. Sometimes like I can't help it, I think.
I think like if Something Rotten's undercurrent is re-examining our thoughts on violence in video games, but also sometimes we get a moment like this in The Darkness too, where like, it's just fucking fun, Jackie. You know, like when Tarantino said that one time.
It is. I mean, put this in that montage that they showed Donald Trump of violent video games. Like,
oh man, we got to talk about that one day.
I think
I've been sitting on that for years.
Diego, the mere fact that you played Manhunt, and maybe Manhunt 2 if you were looking for the like uncensored version, I feel like speaks to the fact that it's like those games are not fun, and so like playing them I think belies a certain just like curiosity with the subject matter that goes beyond just game feels good to play.
Yeah, especially back then, like it was like the time where I was like really like getting into games. Like I had my own PC. I had my own PC for like a couple of years by that point. Yeah, I was just like on that search of like, okay, let's see what's out there. And I don't want to like lie, but I think I must have been like that kind of like edgy teenager looking for like, oh, the most violent games on PC, on YouTube, something like that. I mean, okay, I gotta play this and I gotta play this and I gotta play this. And yeah, I mean, if I picked up, I mean, you two can speak more of this. But if I pick up like Manhunt 2, nowadays I'll probably be like, yeah, this sucks to like actually play.
Yeah, we agree. It does suck.
Yeah, even more so that I don't know, like the Darkness one. Like the Darkness one has like an aiming problem. You just can't get that aim right. But yeah, for Manhunt and such, I don't know. I don't even think that the story itself would like grab me. It's like, oh yeah, Fight Club, cool, yeah. I actually got to see that movie afterwards, so yeah, I know what's up here. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like, yeah, I don't know, like, I play stuff like, I don't know, like Hatred, and I was like, yeah, this is just boring. But I always like try and like, I don't know, like play them and see what's up, if they have like anything to say, or like even if the spectacle itself is like interesting in some way. Yeah, I don't know.
I think we are both, Blake and I both certainly Googled something like most violent video games. Like, I'm sure I looked up those like Watch Mojo's top 5 grossest game deaths or whatever.
I still do it for movies. I'm not afraid to admit to be a 28-year-old man still doing that with my time. I don't do it for games because I just know them now, but you know, I got every now and then got to go to Watch Mojo, see what's going on in the cinema world with violence.
That's right. They ask you to write those articles now on the top 5 most violent games.
They should. They'd be better lists if I wrote them, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay, so you go through this graveyard, you kill the man who has killed Aunt Sarah, and then you go after the rest of the cult, which brings you to a locale that I was very excited about when we got there, because I wrote a carnival ! It's like, I fucking love carnival levels. It's such a fun setting, and it starts fun. And I guess before the gameplay starts at all, we get a couple more Jenny flashbacks, right? Because you're walking along the carnival, you see her, she's kind of like beckoning you to come under the boardwalk and stuff, and then you even do some like I feel like it's the easiest thing in the world for these games to be like, you're used to shooting people, but what if there was a carnival shooting game? And so you do a shooting game and you try to win Jenny a big blue bear.
And I won it. That's all I need to know about that. I like these moments. Like, I don't know. Darkness not a particularly smart or deep game, but I do like that there's time spent further fleshing out Jenny and Jackie's relationship. Like, it's easy to imagine a world where The Darkness 2 just came out and that story was completely stripped out in, like, exchange for, like, really good gameplay. But, like, there's considerable time and thought here spent behind, like, adding more to Jenny and Jackie's relationship, even posthumously, that, like, I appreciated. I think they're the highlight of this level, which I actually think is, like, the worst level in the game.
I have mixed feelings about it, as I did in the previous episode, which is that I'm glad there's more time with Jenny. I do feel like in these, she could just kind of be like any woman. You know, the idea of her being like, hey, Jackie, can you win me the big bear? Doesn't seem particularly specific to, like, who we know Jenny to be. It's just kind of like, hey, you know what? You go to a fair and your girlfriend wants you to win a prize. But the section that I actually like much more, especially because it's kind of blending the two realities, is when you go on that haunted ride.
Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, that was, other than it being janky as hell for me, it was really cool.
You ever been on one of these rides in real life? Either of you?
No.
I
mean, I'm curious about them, but no, I never had the chance.
I've driven through the backwoods of Kentucky before, which is like this in real life.
That's right. I love the State Fair. I have gone on some theoretically haunted rides, and I guess I've been on the one at Disney World, the Haunted Mansion or whatever. Let me tell you, this is so much scarier and so much better than any of those where they have, like, actual corpses being, like, sawed apart in the ride and, like, hands reaching out of the walls and stuff.
Also, people shooting you.
That's right.
Which is, gotta be scarier than the real one in Raleigh's State Fair.
That's right. But what I did think was interesting about this is that usually, if Jenny is around, you don't have your guns out. And this is, like, the one time in the game where, like, Jenny is theoretically sitting next to you this whole ride, but you are still, I mean, I was, like, dual-wielding SMGs and, like, popping dudes when they jumped out from behind the ride scenery. And I just thought it was kind of an interesting, like, meshing of the sentimental moments with the, you know, gunplay that we're used to.
It's not like, also, like, the game kind of ruins the moment by having Jenny being like, oh, why are you shooting? Or, like, who are all of these people? It's like, it's still part of the ride for her. And I really like that detail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you all get the same voice clip from Jenny repeatedly? The same scream for her the entire trip, though?
Oh, that's I don't think so. But maybe I didn't notice.
There was one sound clip of her screaming, and that was the only one that played for me every single
really
time
funny.
a jump scare happened.
No.
It was a bit annoying.
That's hilarious. I did have some more. We talked about look. It's boring to talk about glitches, but I got so stuck under the boardwalk on the geometry that I had to, like, Google stuck on geometry darkness, and, like, multiple people had this, and the only way to fix it was, like, shifting it from full screen to windowed or whatever. And so, like, there are some problems playing it on modern hardware. Blake, you couldn't launch it for near the end.
It's true. I had to uninstall and reinstall it last night just to get it to work. Yeah. And even then, the ending got a little janky for me. Like, the final boss had issues with loading in the enemies because they kind of come in waves.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, after I would kill a wave, there would be a solid, like, 30 seconds where I would just have to, like, sit in an empty room waiting for them to come back. So
I remember having that problem, yeah. And that was,
really?
years ago. So
Interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to learn Digital Extremes didn't do much post-launch support on this thing. Because, like, 11 years later, you're still running into stuff like that. But it is what it is.
It's a shame just because, as we talked about, it's like the beginning of this game is so polished where, like, the pacing of everything is just so kind of perfectly breakneck that then at the end, when you get the sense that these last levels just did not get the same level of shine, it doesn't, I let me ask you this. From the first half to the second half, what was your kind of like experience, your emotional roller coaster with the game? Was it consistent, or did it rise, or did it fall? What'd you feel?
I mean, the carnival was where I was like, I'm not having fun. Like, that sucked. Because the first half, we played these games, or at least I did, in 2 chunks. Like, the first half, just sat, played the whole thing, then played the second half, the whole thing, nonstop. The first half was just, like, smitten. No real complaints, other than it was too short. The second half was a bit more peaks and valleys for me. Like, I struggled a bit with the cemetery level, the carnival level. We can talk about, like, there were a few specific things in that just made it such a fucking headache for me. And then after that, like, by the time we get into the later levels and the Estacado house, like, I was starting to have fun again. I also just dropped the difficulty down to easy during the carnival level and never moved it back up. I was like, well, I just needed to blast through that one level, but I'm just going to leave it here because now it's like a crazy power trip for me and it feels really good. So I just left it there. That might have shaded it, but I would definitely say, and this is true of a lot of games, the front half was kind of the stronger portion for me overall. Diego, what about you?
Yeah, I think it falls into that, like, going back to that example with the lights. It falls into that video game trap of, like, yeah, we had to, like, make, on one end, make, like, enemies stronger, like, add them, like, they have, like, this, like, skin shield or whatever it's called. They have, like, their own shields as well, and they have, like, bigger weapons or whatnot. You have, like, all of these, like, bullet sponges type enemies, like, showing up, like, more and more often. And you have, like, yeah, we're now, like, introducing, like, bigger lights that you can, like, actually, like, get around unless you, like, go and find a generator or something like that. And it's like, yeah, I get why, but kind of, like, again, like, that novelty starts to wear off, and it becomes frustrating. Like, the first time you're, like, shooting, like, light bulbs or something like that on the street, it's fun, it's like, it's cool, and then it's just like, yeah, there's, like, too much going on, and even if, like, I don't know, like, dual wielding weapons is fun. Once you get the hang of, like, the using the tentacles at the same time, it's a good mix. But I don't think it's like the response from the enemies is not doesn't quite match, I think, that experience. So yeah, I'm not surprised that you, Blake, like, turning the game down to easy, found it, like, more enjoyable that time. I'm pretty sure that I was stubborn back then, and I must have played it in normal or hard. And that was, like, back when I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna, like, repeat this level until I beat it. Nowadays, I probably wouldn't bother at all.
At this point in my life, if I die, like, 2 times in a row in a game, I'm like, all right, switching that down to easy and not worrying about it. But something you brought up was my major issue with the carnival level, and it's the lights in it. That was, like, my big hang up, is there's these big lights that surround the level, but it's not always immediately clear where they are. And so they'll funnel in, like, 10 enemies at a time, and you need to be evading or rushing in, but you can't always find the light source. And so a lot of the time I was just spent craning the camera and being like, where the fuck is this light on the edge of the level that I need to shoot? And by the time I could find it, I'm dead. And it's like, the game did a much better job compared to Darkness 1 of making the lights easily accessible and also easy to shoot out. Like, part of the rhythm of this game, I think, is, like, shooting guys and lights in the same clip. Like, just, like, it felt very fluid, and this level felt like the Darkness 1, where it's like, I have to now spend dedicated time shooting lights out, and it just grinds it to a halt.
Yeah, and you're looking straight up, and so you're, like, running into enemies and you can't see them. I think the point about the kind of specialized enemies is good as well. And this is it's one of these just kind of interesting game difficulty things that I almost, it's like, when you're playing Bayonetta, what are the most fun enemies to fight? They're, like, the weakest dudes that you can do anything to, because they're the ones that you can, like, launch super quickly, you can, do backflips on, you can hit 3 of them with 1 attack, and as they start introducing more enemies, it, like, ups the complexity, but it feels like your toolbox isn't as useful, because, like, the things that you do don't affect them that much. And so especially when you have those guys with whips that come in and they like steal your weapons, but also they just have so much health that it feels like all of the fun things that your darkness tentacles and whatever can do are just ineffective. And this carnival, I think it gets better after the carnival, but this level really kind of, there were sections where I only had a shotgun. Like the checkpoint just loaded me in with a shotgun, and it was like, I can't get close enough to anyone to like do anything, and they're not giving me things to throw at them.
I think that's like a design issue of this game. And it's highlighted by the whip guys, is like the game can never decide where it actually wants you to be in relation to the enemies. And like, I understand certain enemies will need different proximities to kill them, but it's like you might have an enemy, a whip enemy who's better to take down at a distance, but he's standing next to two enemies you need to be up close at, like fighting. And so it's like, okay, so where am I supposed to stand? Because the whip guy will steal my gun, but like also I need to rush in towards him, which means I lose my gun, and now there are three other guys around him I can't get to. So it's like, it feels like this, they never quite got the right like mix match of like how to actually approach multiple different types of enemies at once.
Yeah.
Which is like something like the Doom games kind of solved, which is like just be in the face of every single enemy all the time.
Yeah, but also, I mean, it's like, yeah, Doom is so kind of, it's so beautifully specific with like, okay, you got the floating demons. There is a really effective way to kill them. You've got the pinkies,
right.
You have to get behind them. It's like every enemy has kind of like, this is the thing I need to do. And this is like, well, the thing I need to do with all of them is just shoot them. So it's like, but it's still felt like one strategy was not working for everything.
I think a lot of issues with the second half of this game would have been solved by not having the whip guys in it.
Yeah.
Honestly, like they're a major pain.
Yeah. They're cool conceptually, but when you actually have to fight them, it's no good. So you get this, you go all the way through the carnival. There's a moment that I do, it's like even within this level that we kind of disliked. There's some good funny stuff. There's a part where you have to open a garage so your Darkling can drive a big gas truck through through the thing.
Yeah.
And what's very funny is like you see it and it's like, oh, it's a big like truck full of gas, so obviously this is going to blow up. And what happens is you open it, the Darkling drives through the gate, not blowing up, and then there are a couple enemies that are like, what was that? And they poke their head in there, and then there's a huge explosion, and it's like, it's still got that good kind of silly comic book timing.
And one of the bodies flies directly at you at just the right moment to be like, to add an extra laugh. Like, yeah, that was a very good moment.
But eventually you get captured by this this mean cult leader dude again, and he puts you in an Iron Maiden because this game, we've been crucified and now we're being Iron Maidened.
I had a weird existential moment watching this scene where I started to visualize what it'd truly be like to be in an Iron Maiden right before it closed. I had nothing deeper to say on it. I started thinking about it. It gave me a weird rush of anxiety, imagining Jackie in that moment, being like, what would you do if you were in that situation? Fellas, I'm opening the floor up to you. What would you do?
That's a real, like weird... What would you do if you saw this?
It weirdly stuck with me more than a lot more of this game story. Maybe not weirdly. This game story is not the best. But, like, it stuck with me thinking about, like, man, it'd be crazy to be in an Iron Maiden. And the second before that thing closes. Because did it kill you immediately? Or was it one of those, like, crucifixion things where it's like it's the worst pain you'll ever be in, but you'll also be alive for, like, an hour?
Well, I know some history about Iron Maidens. Namely that they are fake. Like they were never used. It was like almost completely. There were things that are a little similar, but like the fact is, there are no Iron Maidens that exist that were made prior to the 1800s. So it was just kind of like people being like, "Hey, medieval history was fucked up. Look at this thing. But they actually just like made that thing. So, and I think
that sucks.
Part of the reason that if you think about it, it's like, I guess they are made up, is exactly what you asked, which is like, this thing is so complex to just kill someone immediately. You know, it's like, it's not really a torture device, because you would just die if you were put in one.
Or would you, though? Because, like, I mean, obviously it hit you, if it was hitting you in the brain or heart, you would die, but also, like, the way it works is you would not bleed because you just have spikes stuck in you. You'd have to open it back up and pry the people out just to like eventually you'd probably die of like shock or like blood clots, but you would be alive if it missed vitals.
I mean, I think there's also maybe the kind, and this is like there are other torture things that are similar to this, which is like if they left enough room for you to stand, it would be that kind of thing of like, oh, maybe they're not actually piercing you, but you have to stand perfectly still. And after, you know, like a couple hours of that becomes torture in itself.
Something Rotten bonus episode we're going to do is just Googling Spanish Inquisition torture devices and just looking those up for a little while.
I do think it's a perfect device for this game, which is, you know, completely over the top and loves to just kill Jackie in various ways. But during this, there's actually a pretty cool monologue moment. Did either of you kind of note this, where Jackie's doing his monologue? He's saying, "Hey, they're gonna come at me with everything they got. They got nothing." But then like there's a light that appears on the side of the screen, like someone like opening a door. And he, like, looks behind him, and then he's in the asylum again. And I thought it was a very cool, like, breaking convention moment.
Yeah. But then you're in the damn asylum.
That's true.
I think there's a point, and I don't know if... It might have been a mix of things. Like, obviously, I'd played on easy. I was playing on easy for the last two levels of this game, which just makes it a fucking power trip. But also... the skill trees are really good in this game. The upgrades are really good. And I'm kind of moving past the asylum.
Oh, that's fine.
Sorry, I don't remember anything interesting happening until the next asylum, I think. That the level in Jackie's house was such an awesome trip for me. Like, I had unlocked the black hole, which is somehow better than the first game, where you, like, enemies will just drop black holes, and then you can grab them and launch them across a level at people, and there's, like, a good explosion effect at the end of a black hole, and the bodies go flying out. Like, the last section of this game was so fun for me, and I think, like, the game does a good job of, like, if you're actually taking the time to invest in the skills and everything, like, there is actually a good ramp up of power and, like, different, like, abilities you can get that make it like a bit of a spectacle, even just in like normal ass fights. Like some of the last big encounters of this, I was like, holy shit, this rules. And it was like not a set piece at all. It was just a normal like engagement.
I agree. I think, you know, it was almost, I like when games don't let you do everything on a skill tree. You know, it's fun to kind of make choices.
Yeah.
But the final unlock on basically everything was so appealing sounding. Like, one that I never got enough points for was just like all pistol and SMG bullets explode. Like, that was one of them. And I was like, fuck, I might play New Game Plus just so I can like get that upgrade. But the black holes are great. I really like the just kind of gun boosting one. Did you use that one? Where it's like,
yeah.
For a while, it essentially gives you like bottomless clips and very powerful bullets. And so if you're like dual wielding SMGs and you hit that, you can just hold down the trigger for like 15 seconds and just kind of like demolish a room. And it's the thing where in the Darkness 1, you would have these crazy cutscenes, and then the game would not let you do that. And in the Darkness 2, they seem really attached to letting you do the cool things that you see in the cutscenes.
Yeah. There's a really great one with the grapple mechanic where you tear a dude up and he gives you get like a darkness shield from it, which you can then throw and slice, which was really fun. Also, like, you see this later in Doom games with the grapple, there are actually like ammo and health. you can get ammo and health to that, which is like an awesome kind of trick. Like the carnival level notwithstanding, and the whip guy notwithstanding, like I do like how often this game would remind me of, you know, the Doom games, which would come a few years later, where it's like, yeah, I do want to be rushing up. I don't want to be hiding. A lot of the Darkness 1 is like hiding behind like shitty corners and cover, and a lot of the Darkness 2 is like, I'm getting right up in these idiots' faces because I can get health and ammo from them if I slice them in half.
It really is a proto glory kill. I would love to know if anyone at id like actually explicitly brought up the Darkness, or if it is just simply good game design and like that's why they did it. Okay, well, here actually before we get to the end and kind of the last bits of story, I want to ask Diego you a question, which is, last episode we were kind of talking about like what we thought. There was a lot of conversation about kind of like what the Darkness represents, because in this game specifically, there are some lines at the beginning where Jackie is really treating the Darkness like an addiction or like something he's kind of in recovery from or whatever, where he's like, he doesn't want to use it and then he uses it and he understands that it's like changing his personality or whatever. When you first played these, or now, have you thought about kind of like the Darkness as a metaphor, as an analogy, something like that?
I back then no. Looking at the gameplay now, maybe. I think the problem is I don't think the game story can actually like withstand something like that, I guess. We like the constant back and forth and like all of those places where it just falls short. So yeah, I don't think I wouldn't give it that merit, I think, because I think, especially like towards the second half and like the later end of the story, it just goes down like the fantasy aspect of the Darkness when it introduces like the Angelus and such. So yeah, no, I hadn't actually thought about that. I mean, it's interesting. I would like to like actually see the first half again to get that context for that. But yeah, it's definitely not something that came to mind when I first played it.
I think the Darkness 1 is like definitely a smarter game, a better written game, like more interesting to kind of think about. I think at its most bare bones, like my takeaway of the story beyond like this is what happened from point A to point B is like they're games about losing control, which is like we talked about in the previous episode, which is like conceptually interesting to me as someone who like has kind of a weird fear around losing control. But I also agree with Diego that I don't necessarily think the Darkness 2 is saying anything all that deeper.
No.
And that's fine. Like I this is the design and mechanics of this game I'm far more interested in engaging with than a lot of the story beats.
Yeah, I guess I was a little, I mean, generally I was a little disappointed by the second half, and part of it was just that the levels got kind of frustrating, but I do feel like it kind of lost what it was doing, because in those first even just like 15 minutes, I was actually really invested in kind of what are they saying about the Darkness, what does it mean to Jackie, but then essentially the whole back half of this game is it gets taken away from you, and then you have to get it back, and then you kind of get it back but not really, and then you finally get it back and you like use it to kill yourself, and like none of that works with any of the kind of like metaphorical stuff that we had talked about. It's like if the Darkness represents an addiction of some kind, then I have no idea what it would be saying about like, oh, someone took it away from me and now I have to get it back, but now I can like use it.
Yeah.
It just like it doesn't track. So Diego, I do think you're correct in kind of like ultimately,
absolutely,
it just feels like the end of the game is so much more comic book storytelling than the beginning's ridiculous too, but there was potential at the beginning, and I think it kind of went unrealized.
I do actually though really like the despair of the post-credit stinger. I think that's actually pretty fun.
That's good. Yeah. So we'll get there. there is a little bit. So Jackie's trapped in this Iron Maiden. You have another section where you control the Darkling, and you run around, and it's kind of a stealth section. It's whatever. It's kind of the Platinum Games thing of like they invented the most fun combat system of all time, and then they're making me not do that combat system.
Oh my god, dude. I don't even know if it was a bug or just the game had a weird quirk in it, but I had the most annoying thing happen to me. So, towards the end of this level with the Darkling, you have to they're the guys with big lights walking around the levels, and you can go through these little like pathways. I don't know what you call them, little crawly spaces. And I got caught between two guys with lights. So I was like, okay, I'll just hide in the little pathway here, and they'll eventually go back to their routing. And they never did, and they were on both ends of it, and they just never moved, and I had to reload a checkpoint.
Oh, see, that's good AI. They're smart.
I mean, I guess that's fair, but I literally couldn't progress
That's so
with the game,
funny.
so I had to reload a checkpoint.
I thought it was very funny that at the beginning of the section, I was like, oh, I've got to sneak up behind them. I'll do my little throat pull. But actually, if they see you, you can just run up to them and kill them also. So it's kind of like an illusion of a stealth section, but you don't really have to play it like a stealth section. Blake, hush for a second. I've got to talk about Nebula. If you've watched my YouTube videos before, you might have heard me talk about Nebula. I've put many hours of bonus videos up there, as well as uncensored and extended essays. But Nebula is not just a video platform. Something Rotten is also hosted on Nebula, and just like with my videos, watching them there is just straight up better. First off, the obvious, no ads. As much as you probably love my and Blake's voices, it's just a superior experience to listen to a podcast without ad interruptions. Every video and every podcast on Nebula comes ad-free. Secondly, you will get to hear every episode of Something Rotten a week before the rest of the world. Desperate to hear us get into that next game? It's available right now on Nebula. Thirdly, for every miniseries, we will be recording a whole bonus episode, essentially a recommendations list for further media related to the game we covered. This is where we'll really get to go outside the box and cover stuff that might not have come up on the main feed. So, more episodes sooner and without ads. Nebula even gives you a custom RSS feed so you can keep listening to it where you listen to all of your podcasts. And when you follow that link in the description and sign up for Nebula, you'll be directly supporting the show. That money from your subscription, it goes to us.
The Darkling is also fast as shit, so I just ran through a lot of the level. Like, like the first half. The second half, you kind of can't really run through. You have to be a lot smarter once the light bulb men show up. But that first half, like, they'll shoot at you, but they can't really keep up with you. So I just zipped through there, getting to where I needed to go. I think the Darkling feels fun to move around. Like, it just has a satisfying speed to him. The levels just are not great.
Yeah, I wish he had like 2 more things he could do. You know, maybe if he could throw something.
Exactly.
You put us on that game design. Anyway,
great minds.
Then the thing happens that Blake, you were hoping would not happen in the first episode, which is that they do take away your darkness powers. You free Jackie from the Iron Maiden, but he's had the darkness sucked away by this big evil guy. But I don't think it's that bad, because they give you an 1887, which is the most fun shotgun to use in any video game.
They give you the strongest shotgun in video game history, and I was like, all right, you know what? I don't need the darkness anymore.
It's really that unpatched
awesome.
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 1887. You know?
Yeah, it was awesome. Like, I was really bummed until Jackie was like, let's go. And I was like, all right, I'm in. Also, playing on easy means you could shoot these dudes in the big toe, and it was still a one-hit kill on them.
I did write down here, I don't care about Jackie's dad. The other thing that the story starts doing is this strange thing with Jackie's dad, where it was like he was a darkness scholar, and you're like in his study. That's where you get the 1887. And it's just kind of like, it's like, so what? you know, maybe this is the kind of thing where we'll get to, clearly they thought they were going to have a Darkness 3. And so maybe there would have been some more in this. But the only interesting part of it that came out of the whole storyline is there's one Jackie monologue where he talks about waking up and seeing his dad stand over him with like a butcher's knife, with kind of the idea being like, his dad was probably thinking about if he ended the bloodline, then the Darkness would also die. And I thought that was an interesting concept. But that was just a monologue, and that's kind of it.
I guess like it's trying to pull from what it was doing with your great grandfather in the beginning of the game, or the first game, which was like mildly interesting, but like you never meet the dad, and his whole story's allocated to like a minute and a half.
Yeah,
total.
and
it's like it's not really going anywhere.
Kind of like the addiction metaphor. It's like, well, you could, if you tried really hard, make this about like generational trauma or something, but it's like the game just isn't interested enough to like give that the space to mean anything. So what you get is just kind of like, oh, Jackie had a dad, and Jackie's dad also had the Darkness.
I wonder, Diego, if you can speak to this at all or not. I don't think either Jacob or I could. Like, if you read the comics, would it be a richer experience at all with some of those? Like, do you think, like, if you read the comics, you'd be like, oh, you know what, I know what the deal with the dad is. Okay, got it, understood. Or if it's just, like, not gonna do much for you there either. Like, maybe we should have read the comics. Also, time is limited and fleeting. Diego, have you read them?
I mean, it's funny that you ask that, because I tried, like, I got like a few copies of it, but they were translated to Spanish. And the thing is, it was like around the time that I was like getting used to like consuming everything I could in English, and I was like, okay, I'm willing to like meet them halfway, because I just like, I got the physical copies and I like the illustrations and I wanted to know more about the story. But like the firm or company or whatever that does those translations over here add a lot of like our slang into it, and I could not get past like issue number 1. So no, I never read them. Like, I was like, no, I do not need, like, I know this story is probably like just almost as silly as this translation is like portraying it, with like the kind of language that you will expect and that you actually get to see in the game. But I was like, yeah, no, this is just like too much for me. Like, I cannot handle that. Seeing like words that my friends in high school use while reading about the Darkness, and like,
interesting.
No, thank you.
A bit of Blake Hester lore here for the panel. So my dad was a comic artist in the 90s. Not for anything notable. But he has like, yeah, that's right. He's the inventor of Garfield, believe it or not. That's why I fucking look like Garfield. It's not gonna play to anyone who doesn't know what I look like. But he like, so he was really into the Image stuff. I'm gonna be at their house like week after next. I'm gonna see if I can find some old issues. Maybe I'll like send you iPhone pictures, Jacob, and we could talk about some of the stuff in the comics. I'm sure he has some, because he was like really into this stuff and drawing similar comics back in the day. So I'll take a peek.
It's, yeah, you know, you wonder, because there are like, the one kind of collectible in this game is there are these Darkness relics, where it's like, oh, here's like the skull of someone, or like this crystal ring.
Yeah.
And those could just be something they totally made up for the game, or it could be from the comics, and I just don't know. And there's not really any like lore attached to them within the game. They're just these things that you pick up and it gives you points. And like, again, to be clear, I think it's the right decision, because I don't want this game to slow down.
And it already does in too many occasions.
So there is another kind of weird half boss fight here where the big evil guy has kind of given the Darkness to someone else. There's like this henchman guy who's like, come on, give me it, I can handle it, give me the Darkness. And finally he's like, yeah, here you go, have the Darkness. And you fight him, and it's just kind of nothing. And it feels like the game should be throwing some big set pieces at you, and instead these last couple levels are just kind of running through a series of rooms.
Yeah, didn't we talk about it in the first issue that at some point Digital Extremes was like entirely pulled off this game to work on BioShock 2's multiplayer? Maybe makes the back half make a little sense.
Well, I think they had like barely started. I think they did most of the development of it. Like they were in kind of like pre-production when they were pulled. But yes, I do think they just ran out of money, kind of. And they even talked about in those interviews. They were like, yeah, we had plans that we didn't get to do.
Yeah.
And then there's just kind of the last level. Well, here, okay, let's talk about the thing at. No, I'm remembering the order here. Okay, there's the last level where you were in Jackie's, dad's mansion or whatever, and you're just kind of running through. I do think it's a very fun level, just kind of in terms of shooting people with guns and throwing things at them. It's a really exciting part of the game.
I agree. There's a fight in, I don't know what you call that, like if it's the big dining room or living room, there's just a fight in a big ass room, which has like smartly placed light sources that you can't get around, but they're not also intrusive. So it's like, okay, kind of avoid the middle. You have to play the perimeters. There are people up top. There are people jumping down at you. Like, very good. A black hole in that room. Most fun you can have as a little man. I'll tell you what, it ruled. And it all builds to the boss fight against, the outsider from the Dishonored games, who's weirdly in this game. And that's fine too, I guess. But it's kind of like this big fight through the hallways in the dining room where I think this level fucking whips ass.
Yeah, I always know a game's combat is really hitting for me if I'm like, I wish this had like an infinite tower mode. Like, I wish I could just go into, like, this would just give me, like, waves in an arena. I would love to do that. And Blake and I tried the multiplayer, which you might hope is that, but in fact, it is not.
You can't quad wield in the multiplayer. Like, I don't even think we need to talk about it beyond that. You can't quad wield. So it's mediocre at best. Online, though, still working, which is a bit surprising.
Online still working. You can see all of the offensive caricatures that they let you play as in that mode. Good that it's not in the main game, I think. And the final boss is this pretty disappointing, just like, the guy just kind of teleports from one place to another and you shoot him. Like, it's kind of nothing. But then
he has an interesting mechanic where you have to swipe with the darkness tentacles in the direction of his attack, which I thought was kind of cool. He has like projectiles that come at you either horizontally or vertically, and you have to swipe at them.
I killed him so quickly that I did not even notice that was a thing.
Yeah. Really? Oh, I thought that was cool. I really like that.
That sounds
attack.
cool, but no, when he popped up, I would just put my like super darkness gun energy on and do a wield, and just like and like a third of his health bar was gone.
That's funny.
But then you grab the darkness, I don't know, scepter, whatever all the darkness is in, and you kill yourself with it. Oh no!
Believe it or not, Jackie Estacado going to hell.
Jackie Estacado's going to hell, which is another kind of like, much like in the first game, it is this kind of plot point of, oh, you think the darkness might be in control, but in fact, Jackie's in control, and he goes to hell. But first, he goes to the asylum, and they offer an actual different ending.
Oh yeah, what happens if you stay with Jenny?
Diego, do you remember this? Where you're on the rooftop and you get the choice?
Yeah. It's basically just like, it's kind of like you repeat the dance from the diner scene, but they like inside the asylum. It's like they make space for you and you like dance with Jenny, and yeah, it basically just like you have like that one moment with her and the credits roll, and that's it. I don't remember if the game like tells you anything of like, hey, you should like go back for like the actual ending or something. I think it just ends.
Yeah, it's very much a just kind of like intentionally hollow ending. You know, it's like you don't get to play that whole level in hell because the game just ends. Also, it is weird that Jenny theoretically works there, and then she's like, yeah, Jackie, we'll be together. if you don't jump. But I guess if you have a patient who's going to jump, you might just say things to them.
Also, if you're just a figment of the darkness's creation, you can kind of bend the rules of the Hippocratic Oath. And
That's true. She doesn't have to act in a super ethical way. But the true ending of the game is instead you jump off the roof of the asylum, you die once again, and you're in hell. And this is where we see this thing that we very briefly saw on the previous episode. And Blake, you were like, I think Jenny's crucified. The most comic book character design the game gets is with Jenny in these last couple minutes, because she is wearing just like a white ripped shroud, and she's like crucified on this big
it's toilet
thing.
paper.
And it's this stupid thing of like, well, she's supposed to look tortured but also like really sexy, you know? And it's just it's I was really I found this part almost impossible to emotionally connect to.
Absolutely. It's stupid. It's full 90s comic book. That said, the hallways you have to run through where they just send waves of hell spawn at you.
It's pretty fun. They make new guns for hell that have like hell names, which I think is is pretty fun. And then there's this final thing where you have to rip away the kind of like binds that are holding Jenny. And then Diego, you referenced Angelus a little earlier. So do you want to tell us what happens in the like after credits scene?
Oh, like the actual like ending of the game?
Oh yeah, I guess because there is that one first where she comes down and just says like, "Thank you, Jackie," and you hug. You know, so that's what happens before credits. But then after credits, there's this big other thing that happens.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, Shani actually is like not also but part, I think, of the Angelus itself, or herself, or them. No, themselves. Sorry, they refer to them as we. And you see like this, which again falls into that trope because it's like you see like this awesome design at first, but the first thing that thing that the camera shows you is like her ass.
Oh
basically.
yeah,
their ass. Sorry. In like for like solid 5 seconds.
It's a very like Kojima camera direction of just linger on the ass.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're like kind of like touch themselves as they're like saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm finally free," and it's like, okay, fine. And yeah, this is the moment that again many years ago, although I got kind of mad seeing it again now, got me like, "Where's the Darkness Tree?" And that led to like all of these tweets that I've been doing since, because it's just like they have like this brief chat, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not gonna fight you." Like Shaggy says, "I'm not gonna fight you." It's like, yeah, I'm not even like who, like, what do you think I'm gonna give you a chance or something like that? And they just basically like fly off and leave Shaggy inside hell. And he screams, and the game ends, and you see the Darkness 2 title. And yeah,
he gives a big movie, just like no.
It's like a weirdly despairing ending where it's like you did all this and it was for nothing. Like it was you lost, Jackie. Like it's a huge moment to just bury at halfway at the end of the credits. I truly hate post-credit stingers, and this is like before the MCU-ification of everything. It's a huge moment to just be like, everything you did was kind of for nothing. Like Jenny is gone and you are stuck in hell. Like it's a fucking crazy moment. And consider me now a part of the Darkness 3 crew. We gotta get this going.
No, especially as you two were saying, like they introduced like hell and they introduced like these new weapons, and it's like probably like the most fun 15 or 20 minutes of like that second half, and then it just ends. It's like there's nothing else here. Like if you want, you have like New Game Plus and you have to like play the game again, and that's it. It's like, okay, but were they planning to do something more with all of this at some point? Like it's just like the Angelus design itself, aside from like the camera shots. It's like it seems like too much work went into it to like not to like show it for like like one short cutscene and nothing else.
Yeah, and
they programmed jiggle physics on this thing, which is a surprising thing to learn that was in the game until after the credits. So it's like they clearly had plans for Darkness 3. You don't make jiggle physics for nothing.
In one of the interviews that I read, the game director, or someone attached to the Darkness 2, was like, oh yeah, there's a version of the Darkness 3 that's the biggest game ever made. That, like, I'm sure, lots of game directors could probably say that about unmade games, but you do think about like this game largely based on Earth, and then in the last few minutes goes to hell, teases heaven. If the third game is fully just like heaven and hell, if it goes full kind of like biblical stories, which the Darkness as a force is, theoretically very connected to like God, because because whatever, that would be awesome, and I would love to see a like Bayonetta setting Darkness game. But we know it doesn't happen, and so it's very disappointing. And the prior to credits scene also feels like just kind of a less effective version of the first Darkness's ending. Because, Blake, we talked about how much the Darkness 1 ends with this kind of very saccharine, like, oh, I'm lying on Jenny's lap, everything is okay. And then Jackie's like, is this a dream? And Jenny's like, yep, this is not real. You have to wake up. And this one ends with you freeing her from hell, theoretically. And she says, I can't stay here long. And then you, like, hug her. And so it's kind of the same feeling of, like, you bought yourself a very brief moment of happiness, but it's a fiction. But if the whole game was a lead up to just the ending of the Darkness 1 again, it's hard to say, like, why the story was worth it, what happened.
Yeah. Make the Darkness 3. What else is Digital Extremes doing? Making fucking Warframe? Nobody plays that shit.
Making the most popular game. Here's something that I noticed. The after credits scene is the only third-person cutscene in the entire game.
Yeah,
because they have to show the angel's ass, and so because of that, you get a third-person view of Jackie.
It's true. I also picked up on that. I don't really like looking at Jackie. I'm ready to say this now that we're done with the two games. I don't really like looking at him in either game. He looks stupid. I mean, the first game, he's literally the hatred character. In the second one.
Yeah, in this game, they gave him kind of wavy hair, so he looks a little less like him.
This dude, look, I'm A, not Italian, B, not in the Mafia. I think a dude like this would be laughed out of the Mafia looking like that. Come on.
Yeah,
come on now. Are you kidding me? All these made men, and then you have this dude who looks like he's the lead singer of The Cure. Like, doesn't look like Robert Smith at all. Looks like he's the keyboard player of The Cure. Like, get out of here. Come on.
He looks like kind of like Peter Steele from Type O Negative, like something like that. Like this big guy with like long dark hair.
Yeah. That's a better pull than The Cure. Type O Negative.
I like both.
I just don't want to see him anymore. The next game should never leave first person.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked through the whole story, but I guess, what I want to hear, Diego, especially from you, Darkness 2 fan number 1, is kind of like 11 years after this game, does it have a legacy at all? And what, I don't know, like what do you think the Darkness 2's most lasting effects are, or should have been, if they, if it didn't actually have an impact?
I think it's like, at least on my end, I don't think there's probably like a following of it. It's not like that huge of a thing. Like whenever there's like a new Nintendo Direct or like E3 comes around and the showcases start happening, I know that I'm the only one asking for, they're probably going to show the Darkness 3. And I'm fine with it. I think it, like part of his legacy is like, I don't know, it feels like one of those like odd first-person shooters of that era that could only happen in that era. But they got like super close to like not be like, yeah, I don't know, like for example the Darkness one. It's like, yeah, you have like all these gimmicks and like all these things, and it's like, yeah, it's novel. It doesn't work that great. And then they had like the second chance with the sequel, and it feels great to play most of the time. And it's like, I don't want to say, oh yeah, this first-person shooter like actually took a risk and like did something different, but there is something about that. And like, yeah, I don't know, like I also love Doom. And like while seeing the long play before recording, I also picked that up like, oh, this reminds me of like Lurkers. Like I had completely forgotten about this. So there are like these elements that like kind of got standard now. Like I wonder if there were like a Darkness 3, like at some point, it's like, okay, so what would the novelty be like at this point? But like remembering this from like back then, it's like, yeah, the Darkness is like its own thing. Like it doesn't always like work. It's not like, I don't know, it's not like the most perfect game to like revisit sometimes, especially the first. But it's like, it's the Darkness. Like there's not like another game that does like that same thing, like almost similarly or like improves on it even. And I don't know, I think that's like what's still like appealing to me. Like I know that if I would have actually gotten the time to like go back and actually play it for this episode, I would be like even more thrilled for like how well probably some of those ideas hold up. So yeah, it's a shame that it kind of like they got a lot of things right, and it's like, oh, I wish they would have gotten like another chance to like, I don't know, maybe like fail horribly or like do like the best thing ever. Like I don't think there's gonna be there will have been like an in between.
Right.
The two.
I almost feel like maybe this is wishful thinking, but it feels like this game came out too early for me. You know, because when Doom 2016 came out, people were so excited about like finally a first-person shooter that like strips away all the bullshit and is really just about like amazing, feels good shooting action. And I feel like if the Darkness had come out in kind of that revival of like old school first-person shooter feeling games, people would have praised it, you know, not as much as Doom 2016, but would have kind of like gotten what it was doing. And instead, I feel like it just released in this time when it just kind of didn't fit, you know, when the biggest games were still like, you know, everyone was still really entranced with the new kind of Call of Duty Modern Warfare direction that games were going, or something like BioShock and BioShock 2 and the immersive sims or whatever, where it's like a kind of game like The Darkness 2 just did not really feel like it fit in that time period. And maybe it would, you know, if it had released a couple years later, maybe people would have actually received it better. But maybe, you know, it's hard to be a 5-hour game and get people really, really excited about you. So that's also true.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a similar thing with The Darkness 1, right? Like where that game did come out and like at least critics were like freaking out over it. But 2 months later, BioShock 1 comes out and it's like, okay, so what happened to Darkness 1? Like, was it completely overshadowed by BioShock coming out? Like, is that the reason we don't talk about the series more? Is like, it just never had a real chance to leave a bigger footprint because of like various outside things going on in the game industry at that time? It's hard to say. It's all a bit of pontification, but like, I kind of wish there was more because like the glory kill analogy, it makes it easy to be like, yeah, Darkness 2 maybe was a little ahead of its time because like we're seeing kind of glory kill type stuff show up in other games now, and it's like, well, fuck, man, this did it 4 years before Doom 2016 came out.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that like The Darkness 2 has a 5 points lower meta score than The Darkness 1, which playing both, I mean, it's like, you know, one released in 2007, one released in 2012, so I know critics had different expectations and whatever, but like, boy, are those two things switched around from where they should be.
Yeah. Crazy. The legacy for Darkness 2 for me is game whips ass Bring it back.
That's right. This is the last completely meaningless thing that I have to say is this game ends in almost exactly the same way as Metal Hellsinger, which came out last year, because Metal Hellsinger at the end is also like, get ready to fight heaven. And it would be very funny if that game also didn't get a sequel and we just had these series of games promising that you were going to get to kill angels and then never actually following through on it.
Well, my new headcanon is the sequel to Darkness 2 is Neon White. And brother, I'm having a blast.
That's great. We should get them to confirm that.
That's right. You probably could. You could tweet anything at Neon White and they'll just be like, fuck yeah, dude. Like, they have a wild Twitter account. Yeah.
Diego, before we end for today, you want to tell people where they can kind of read some more of your stuff or hear you or, get more Diego in their life?
Get more. Yeah, if you want to see this guy asking for a game that's probably never going to happen, you can find me on Twitter at Diego Arguello66. That's Arguello. And yeah, I run a games website where people can are more than encouraged to pitch me, especially if they're only starting out in the game space, called Into the Spine. I also host a podcast about Ace Attorney with a wonderful host and colleague, Shay Costello, called Tournament Breakdown. That's at Breakdown AA. And yeah, I'm writing in places like Game Informer and Polygon and Diverge and a couple others. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Indulging this guy who always tweets about the darkness. Yeah.
Our first guest in years. I was like, Jacob, we got to get Diego on. If we're covering the darkness, there's one guest we get, and it's Diego.
There are very few people who are still beating the drum about the darkness, and so I'm very glad to have found one of them.
However, let me come to Diego's defense and say, I'm a believer now. I am with you.
That's right.
Put out the fucking Darkness 3. And as far as I know, you know what would be interesting? And I'm not going to do this. But it would be interesting to go play the Warframe games and be like, okay, what's the design or mechanical lineage from the Darkness 2, if anything?
I was also thinking that. But Warframe is one of those games that people are like, once you play 80 hours, it really opens up. And I'm like, no, thank you.
Here's the thing you gotta know about me. I'm not gonna play 80 hours of my favorite game of all time. So, I'm not gonna do that for Warframe.
You beat Persona 5.
Dark Sector came out before. Oh, sorry.
What'd you say, Diego?
Dark Sector came out before the
Yes,
Darkness,
it did.
Right?
Dark Sector. Yeah,
but that's another game that I've been saying we should play on this podcast. So it was fun to hear that they had made that. Anyway, next week is going to be our Q&A listener special. So if you have thoughts, feelings, questions about the Darkness 1 or 2, or just in general about the podcast, you can email those to somethingrottenpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is somethingrottenpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to answering all of your questions. And for Blake Hester, my name is Jacob Geller. We are Darkness 3 fanatics now. We will not rest until we get that game to come out.
Next season, we're doing Darkness 2 again.